At Christmas Eve dinner, my mother folded her hands on the tablecloth, looked across the candles at my brother and said, "I've decided. When I'm gone, the house goes to him. He needs the roots more than you do." No preamble, no warning. Just that sentence, landing between the dinner rolls and the green bean casserole like she was reading from a grocery list. My brother smiled into his wine glass. I had been paying their mortgage for 5 years. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the person everyone counts on, right up until the moment they stop counting you at all? Because if you have, you already know how that dinner ended. And if you haven't, maybe what I'm about to tell you will help you recognize the moment before it arrives in your own life. My name is Reeve, and I grew up in the house my mother just handed away. It's a craftsman bungalow in the Stapleton neighborhood of Denver, the kind of house that always smells faintly of cedar and old rain, with a front porch wide enough for 2 rocking chairs and a decade of Sunday mornings. My father bought it the year before I was born. He refinished every floorboard by hand, stayed up late with a heat gun and a putty knife while my mother was still pregnant and sleeping upstairs. He told me that story so many times I could almost remember it as my own memory. He died 6 years ago. Sudden cardiac event, the paperwork called it. Like his heart made a decision without consulting anyone. My brother was 24 then. I was 27. My brother had just moved back home after his 3rd attempt at a music career stalled somewhere in Nashville. He needed time to regroup, my mother explained, space to figure things out. I had a real job by then, a financial analyst position at a mid-size investment firm downtown. Numbers were my first language. Balance sheets, quarterly projections, risk assessments. I understood how things added up and what happened when they didn't. Growing up, the dynamic had been so gradual I'd barely felt it forming. I was the one who packed her own lunch at 8, who figured out bus schedules at 12, because our mother was often overwhelmed by the logistics of 2 kids and a job and a house. My brother was the one who needed reminding, soothing, accommodating. He was sensitive, my parents said, artistic, different. I was capable, steady, fine. And somehow those 2 categories never moved. One of us was always waiting to be lifted, and the other was always doing the lifting. And after enough years, it stopped feeling like an injustice and started feeling like physics. 6 months after my father died, my mother called me in a quiet voice I hadn't heard from her before. The account was running low. She didn't ask me directly. She described the problem carefully until I offered to help. I covered the mortgage payment that month, and the next. At some point it stopped being temporary and became simply what I did. The same way breathing becomes what you do, unremarkable, invisible, assumed. My brother contributed $200 once, in cash, folded into an envelope he left on the kitchen counter during a visit. My mother thanked him as if he'd refinished the floors himself. I watched that moment from across the room and said nothing, because by then I understood that noticing things was also my job. I kept paying, I kept showing up. I told myself it was for the house, for the porch and the cedar smell and my father's handiwork under my feet. I told myself family was supposed to mean something. I was right about that last part. I was just wrong about what it meant to them. The Christmas Eve dinner was supposed to be simple. I drove 40 minutes through dark streets to get there, a bottle of Pinot Noir in the passenger seat, and a casserole dish of sweet potatoes wedged into the back. My mother had decorated the way she always did. White lights along the mantel, the ceramic nativity set she'd owned since the 80s, a wreath on the front door that had survived more winters than it probably should have. My brother was already in the armchair when I arrived, feet on the ottoman, watching something on his phone. He gave me a half wave. My mother was managing 3 things in the kitchen at once and refusing help with all of them, which was also traditional. Dinner was fine. We talked about the Broncos, about a neighbor's Christmas lights that had apparently caused a traffic slowdown on a residential street, about a show my brother had been to in Rhino. My mother refilled glasses. The candles burned down slowly. For a while, it just felt like the holiday it was supposed to be. Then, in the quiet that settles between the main course and dessert, my mother smoothed the tablecloth with her palm and said what she'd come to say. "I've been thinking about the house. I want things settled, not left to chance. When I'm gone, it goes to your brother." She paused, then turned to me with a look that was almost tender. "He needs the stability, Reeve. You've always been the independent one. You'll be fine wherever you land." The independent one. A phrase that had been used on me my entire life, meant warmly, I was sure, delivered as a compliment, received over 33 years as a gradual reclassification. Not daughter, not family member, asset. "I've been paying the mortgage for 5 years," I said. "We know that," my mother said, "and we're so grateful." Grateful. The word sat across the table from me like a door closing. "Mom," I kept my voice even. "That's not gratitude money. That's equity. That's 5 years of financial responsibility for an asset I'm apparently not going to inherit." "Reeve." Gentle, firm, closed. "Your brother doesn't have your advantages. He's still working out his path. I want him to have something solid while he does that." My brother had not looked at me once since the announcement. He was studying a particular spot on the tablecloth with the concentration of someone who has pre-decided not to be involved in a conversation they helped engineer. I thought about all 62 payments. The auto draft on the 15th of every month. The February I drove up in 12-degree weather because the furnace had been failing for weeks and no one had noticed until there was no heat at all. I'd waited 4 hours in my coat for the technician. I'd handled the bill. My brother had sent a meme about winter that afternoon. I remembered it specifically because I'd been sitting in that cold kitchen when it came through. I set my fork down on my plate. Not slammed, just set it down the way you set something down when you're done with it. "Okay," I said. My mother blinked. "Okay?" "Okay, I heard you. I'm going to drive home. And starting January, you'll need to cover the mortgage payment yourselves." My brother's mouth opened. My mother's hand moved toward my arm and then stopped, unsure of itself. "Reeve, don't make a scene." "I'm not making a scene," I said. "I'm being very calm. I'm telling you what's going to change." I got my coat from the hook by the front door. The same hook that had been there since I was 7, and I walked out into the December night. Cold and still and dark, the kind of Denver winter night where the stars are brutally clear and the sound of your own footsteps feels too loud. I drove home with the heat running and both hands on the wheel, steady, not crying, thinking. My apartment in Capitol Hill was small and quiet, and mine in a way the bungalow had never quite been. My plants on the windowsill, my shelves organized the way I wanted them. I made tea and sat at my desk and opened my laptop out of habit. Specifically, the credit monitoring dashboard I checked every month, because professional discipline doesn't switch off. My credit score had dropped 31 points since October. I read the number twice. I had no new debt, no missed payments, no changes to any account I'd opened. 31 points didn't just disappear for no reason. I clicked through to the detailed report, moving through it the way I moved through balance sheets at work, looking for the line that didn't belong. There, buried under open accounts, a home equity line of credit issued against the Stapleton property, opened in September. My name was listed as co-applicant. I went very still. I read it again. Co-applicant, my name, my social security number, my signature presumably on loan documents I had never touched, from a bank branch I had never visited, for a transaction no one had ever mentioned to me. The credit limit was $82,000. $61,000 had been drawn. The account was showing 2 consecutive missed payments. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote down everything in columns, the way I always do when something won't resolve itself in my head. What I knew, what I could prove, what I needed to find out. The list filled 2 pages by 2 in the morning. At 8 a.m., I called a consumer law attorney whose contact I pulled from my firm's legal resource directory. She specialized in financial fraud. Her questions were specific, and her voice was the kind of calm that comes from having heard a lot of bad things and understanding exactly what to do about them. "You never signed anything," she confirmed. "I have never applied for credit against that property in any form. I was not aware the property had usable equity. 5 years of payment records. 62 months of bank statements. I also have receipts for home maintenance and repair expenses I covered directly, with dates." A pause. "Send me everything you have. We'll file a formal fraud dispute with the lender today." I spent 3 days in a focused, almost meditative state gathering documents, the payment histories, the repair receipts, the records. My attorney submitted the dispute to the lender, and I filed a separate report with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Unit, quietly, methodically, one step at a time. I didn't call my mother or my brother. I waited. On the 4th day, my mother called me. "The mortgage payment didn't come through," she said. Her voice had the careful quality of someone who has rehearsed an opening but isn't sure what comes after it. "I stopped it," I said. A silence. "What do you mean you stopped it?" "I mean, I notified the bank that I would no longer be making voluntary payments on a property I have no legal interest in. You made that part clear at dinner." "Reeve, that's not. We need that payment. Your brother's restaurant is still getting off the ground, and right now he can't." "Mom," she said it quietly, "I found the HELOC." The silence that followed was a different kind. Heavier. The silence of someone who has been waiting for a specific sentence and has now heard it. "I don't know what you're—" "The home equity line of credit. Opened in September. $82,000. My name is co-applicant on documents I never signed. I let that sit for a moment. 2 missed payments." I heard her exhale, slow and long, like she was letting out something she'd been holding for months. "We needed the money," she said finally. "The restaurant space was perfect. The timing was right. But the bank wouldn't approve him on his own." She paused. "We were going to pay it back before you ever noticed. It was only supposed to be temporary." "It's affected my credit score by 31 points, I said, "and it's delinquent. There was no temporary here, Mom." "Reeve, please." Her voice cracked along the edge of the word. "We're family. You can't. Your brother could be in real trouble. I could be in real trouble." "I know," I said. "I've already spoken to an attorney, and I've filed reports with both the bank's fraud division and the state. There's an active investigation." She was quiet for a long time. "My attorney has explained what resolution typically looks like in situations like this," I continued. "The fraudulent co-signature gets removed from the loan record. The loan gets called. The property will likely need to be sold to satisfy the balance." "The house," she whispered. "Reeve, your father's house." That landed somewhere in me. I won't pretend it didn't. "Dad's house stopped being something I was protecting the night you told me it was going to my brother," I said. "I kept making those payments because I loved him, and I loved that house, and I wanted to help. But you told me very clearly that my contributions were gratitude, not equity. I'm going to hold you to that version of things." She didn't respond for a moment. Then, where would we go? "I don't know," I said. "That's a question you should have considered before you signed my name." My brother called 2 days later. I almost didn't answer. I answered. "I want to explain," he said, which was more than I'd expected from him. "Okay." The restaurant was real. The opportunity was real. I needed backing, and Mom said she could make it work, and I let her, and I knew it was wrong while it was happening, but I told myself it wouldn't matter because I'd pay it back. He stopped. "I didn't pay it back." "No," I agreed. "I was wrong to let it happen." He said it plainly, no hedging. "I don't have a version of this where I was right." I hadn't expected that either. I sat with it for a moment. "Tell the truth if the fraud investigator contacts you," I said. "Don't complicate this more than it already is." "Okay," he said. "And get a job that pays you a salary while you figure out the restaurant thing. Not a dream job, just a job." Another pause. "Yeah, I know." The bank's decision came through 6 weeks after my attorney filed the dispute. The fraudulent co-signature was formally removed from the loan record. The line of credit, now delinquent and undersecured, was called in full. My mother and brother had 90 days to resolve the outstanding balance. They couldn't. My father's house sold on a rainy Thursday in late March. I knew the closing date from a listing alert I'd set up weeks earlier, the kind of small clinical preparation that keeps you from being ambushed by things you already know are coming. The sale satisfied the debt and left my mother with a modest remainder. Not enough for Denver, enough to start carefully somewhere smaller. My brother moved into a friend's place in Aurora and got a job at a restaurant he didn't own. He texted me once to say it was going okay. I texted back that I was glad. My mother found a one-bedroom in a suburb 40 minutes from the old neighborhood. She called me from there on a Sunday afternoon, describing the way the light came through the kitchen windows in the morning. How there was a small patio she might be able to put a chair on when spring came. I was standing in the middle of a condo I'd signed papers on the week before, top floor of a building 6 blocks from where I'd been renting. Exposed brick on the north wall, 2 east-facing windows that caught the morning sun clean and bright, a kitchen with enough counter space to actually cook in, and a view of the mountains when the air was clear. I hadn't told anyone about it yet. It was still mostly empty, smelling of fresh paint and the faint mineral scent older Denver buildings carry in their bones. "East light is good," I told her. "You'll get used to it." A long pause. "Then I'm sorry, Reeve. I know that's not enough. I know I keep saying it, and I know it doesn't fix anything." "It does something," I said. "Not everything, but something." She wasn't a monster, my mother. She was a woman who had spent 30 years sorting her children into categories, one who needed carrying and one who could carry, and then forgot to question whether that arrangement was ever supposed to be permanent. She was someone who had chosen a wrong tool for a problem she didn't want to name out loud, and then discovered the hard way that some choices can't be undone once the other person stops consenting to hold them. I don't say that to let her off the hook. What she did was wrong, and she knew it, and she made the choice anyway. But I had spent enough years carrying other people's weight to know that dragging blame around was just one more heavy thing, and I was done with heavy things I didn't choose. I bought a Meyer lemon tree at a nursery in 5 Points on a Saturday in April, when Denver finally shook off winter for real. Small terracotta pot, barely a foot tall. I set it in my east window and watered it on a schedule because I am who I am, and I watched it do the slow, quiet work of putting down roots in new soil. It's flowering now. Small white blossoms with a clean, sweet smell that catches me off guard sometimes when I walk past. This small, impossible good thing just growing in my own window, on my own terms, for no other reason than that I planted it and gave it what it needed. I take care of it because I want to, not because no one else would, not because it was expected. That difference, that one specific, quiet difference, turns out to be everything. If something in this story felt familiar, share what you're carrying in the comments. And subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.